we couldn't move on to another subject without talking about class action or defective building products that were used on homes all throughout Metro Atlanta. If you buy a home that was built anywhere from the very late 80s all the way through 96, 98, something like that, and so that would be my main trigger for causing me to do some additional research. But you need to be careful if you're buying those homes that they don't have defective siding or defective stucco or defective windows or something like that. I've bought many homes over the years myself as investments that had defective building products on them, but I did not learn after the fact that they were there. I knew they were there, and I could use that to make a decision on where my offer should be for the home seller. So let's just walk through some of these. The first one is pressboard siding. Today, most siding that looks like wood is actually concrete. It's Hardy Plank or a similar brand, so it's a fiber board. It has cardboard ground up and glued back together on the inside of it, and then it's kind of wrapped in concrete. If you're a building products expert and you're listening to me and you don't like my explanation, I would love for you to give some additional clarification. But in general, Hardy Plank siding is a concrete siding, and that the entire piece of siding is wrapped in concrete. Well, way back when, they just used press board. So they took lots and lots of pieces of little board and ran them through an extruder under high pressure, pressed them together, glued them together, and then put an outside coating, or let's just call it seal, on them. And I think if installed correctly, I think most of those boards probably would have lasted just fine. The issue is that in Georgia, they would nail the bottoms. So where one board laps over the board below it, they would nail those boards together. You're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to be nailed at the top underneath where the boards are, and then there's supposed to be a little waterproofing tee, if you will, that goes in between the pieces to keep water from getting up to the house. But in Georgia, we just nail those suckers right to the piece of siding below it. And what happened is when they send those nails in there, they drive the heads in many cases either not quite far enough or too far into it, and you created a perfect place for water to get into it. Georgia Pacific, Louisiana Pacific, Masonite siding, all these were part of a class action lawsuit, which means some court decided the product was defective, decided that people who had the product should have some compensation for it. All of those funds have gone away a long time ago, but there's still plenty of houses out there that have pressboard siding, and you need to be aware that it has pressboard siding. Next thing I'd be worried about or concerned about is polybutylene plumbing. Now today they use red pipe and blue pipe, and I cannot remember the name of it right now. I'm totally drawing a blank. They haven't had any problems with that pipe, but back when, 88, 96, 87 to 97, they used polybutylene, which is an extruded plastic pipe. And it turns out that if they left the pipe out in the sun, that the sun would degrade the pipe. And if you leave chlorinated water in the pipes long enough, there will be pinholes in the pipes. The chlorine will basically eat a hole through the pipe. And so you'll know that it is polybutylene because it will be gray, and it'll either have plastic fittings with plastic crimps, or it'll have copper fittings with plastic crimps, or it'll have copper fittings with copper crimps. And I would say copper fittings and copper crimps, best possible thing to have. Copper fittings, plastic crimps would be in the middle, and then the one that I would want least would be the plastic fittings, the elbows and the T's with plastic crimps. That's a bad combination. It's not a matter of whether or not your home is going to leak, in my opinion, if you have polybutylene plumbing. It is a matter of when it's going to leak. Another thing you have in Atlanta, and they don't build too many stucco homes anymore, but way back when, especially when subdivisions like a St. Ives, a big golf course community that was built in the 80s and 90s in Johns Creek, Georgia, they use synthetic stucco everywhere. They don't build even a lot of real stucco homes in Atlanta because stucco homes have a fairly bad reputation. Now, I think a stucco home is absolutely beautiful. Looks very French, very European, very elegant to me. But the problem is when they install synthetic stucco, and you can literally go up to the outside of a house and scratch on it with your fingernails. very lightly. And if it sounds like you're scratching on the outside of a styrofoam cooler, then that's probably synthetic stucco. And I'm not saying you shouldn't buy it. I'm saying you should have it fully investigated before you buy it. I would not buy a synthetic stucco home without understanding all of the moisture readings behind the stucco all over the house so that I would understand whether or not I needed to replace it. Synthetic stucco was an exterior piece of plywood, call it, and I'm giving you a general explanation, which was covered in a piece of styrofoam, like a styrofoam cooler. It's more of an insulating board, but that was designed, and by the way, stucco homes that worked well, they were insulated great. Then on the outside of that insulating board, they would have a little mesh, like let's just call it a very wide mesh like you'd have on a screened-in porch. And then they would put what's called drive-it, or a Portland cement type of very thin layer of it on the outside of the house. And the problem was that they should have used backer rods like this black round rubber band that they should have put between the windows and the stucco, the frames of the windows and the stucco, so that you could have allowed for expansion and contraction, but they didn't do that. And so when the caulking would crack, you would get water in behind the insulating board, which was such a great insulator that there was no place for the water to go. If you have a brick home, water leaks between the window and the brick, no problem. The brick doesn't even touch the house. The brick is an inch and a half away from the house. It sits on its own ledge next to the house. And so the moisture can come out of there. And if you've ever noticed, you walk around the house and you see these little plastic tubes coming out through the brick, those are weep holes, and that allows moisture to get out. Well, you don't have that on a synthetic stucco home. So if I were going to buy a synthetic stucco home, I would have a full stucco inspection done, and I would have moisture readings done on every single side of the house, so I would know whether or not there was any moisture that I might very well have problems with. I'm not telling you don't buy a stucco home. I'm not telling you don't buy a synthetic stucco home. What I'm telling you is please, 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 please don't buy a stucco home without fully investigating the stucco, whether it's hard coat or whether or not it's synthetic stucco. There's the drive-it that we're talking about. Investigate things fully first.